Welcome to Farming for Health, where Farmer Lee Jones and I talk with leaders in food, farming, and health and wellness to spread knowledge and inspire a plant-forward future, starting now. Welcome to the Farming for Health podcast. I'm Dr. Amy Sapola, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Eric Perner. Thanks so much for being here, Eric.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'd love to just first start off talking about Rep Provisions and how you got into cattle ranching and started Rep Provisions.
Yeah, I grew up on a small cattle farm, so I have some background there. As a young kid, I kind of was a very passionate conservationist, so I loved bobwhite quail, which we had a lot on our ranch at the time. I just love nature in general, so love providing habitat for these different species that existed in our ecoregion, which is a cross timbers ecoregion up here in northeast Oklahoma. However, as a young man, I kind of watched a lot of this local ecology get devastated from poor farming practices. So that could have come in whether it was conventional ag and plowing, to plant crops, or even cattle. Cattle in general can be damaging if not managed properly. So I kind of watched this around me and watched the quail numbers drop and the monarch butterflies, go away, and a lot of our pollinator species. So that kind of affected me as a young man, and decided to go a different direction when I got out of high school and kind of leave the ranch and go get a regular job. So I became an engineer, went to school and worked in oil and gas operations, which was equally extractive that I noticed as I spent quite a few years in that. And it just started to weigh on me. A lot of things that we do can, depending on how we manage these things, can be what I call highly extractive. And that includes agriculture and how we produce energy as well. So I kind of tied a lot of these things together and began to kind of think about other methods of ranching. And I came across a video that Alan Savory gave a TED Talk in 2013, and it really inspired me. And for those who don't know who Alan Savory is, he's a wildlife biologist from Zimbabwe in South Africa, and he managed large game ranches at the time. And he really recognized the importance of animals grazing on land and those proper movement of animals. So, for example, in the area where we live, in the tallgrass prairie, what would have been impacted by large herds of bison were moved through predators. So this predator-prey relationship was really functional in how these grasslands evolved over time. And they actually, Mother Nature did this management for us years ago, just naturally. And that meaning that when animals graze land, they move on and they offer the proper amount of recovery before they go back and graze again. And that's really that in a nutshell. And so I began to really understand that and study that and think about how we could replicate that with our own herds of beef animals. Because the fact is, we can't manage like Mother Nature did several hundred years ago, because things are different. So we have to kind of really take that over and be that piece of the management of what nature would do naturally. One, we have to produce food is number one, but we also don't want to damage our local ecosystems if we can keep from it. And so I began to kind of study these, what are coined as holistic planned grazing, that Alan Savory developed over many, many decades, and started to really fall in line with his belief and his understanding that, hey, when you put animals on land, they can either have a positive impact or a negative impact. It's all how we manage them. And that really resonates with me. So that's kind of what as these extractive industries I was involved in really got me away from it, thinking about how can I do better? How can I leave this world a better place? And so that's how Rep Provisions was dreamed up, that this concept that if we can get enough farmers and ranchers on board to change to regenerative methods, we can really change how we source food, how we grow food, and that it can work better with nature, again, being a part of the ecosystem, not apart from it. And those concepts are what inspired me to start Rep Provisions.
Oh, that's incredible. And there's so much overlap. Obviously, we're a regenerative vegetable farm, and we're so excited to be partnering with you guys, a regenerative ranch, to be able to offer, like, we have a Father's Day box together collaboratively. But I think regenerative agriculture, when you look at giving back to the land, replacing kind of, or restoring what is taken, plus some, plus a little, maybe, right? Is more than just like sustaining. And I'd love to talk about how you guys are doing that. Some of the techniques, because you mentioned like the different techniques you're using. How are you doing that, and how does that affect the health of the animals and the health of the food then that you produce as well?
Yeah, I think you probably kind of need to think about the kind of the different terms you might hear in agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
One being what I call conventional agriculture, so how they grow, soybean or corn, so huge monocrops. And this type of agriculture by itself, just growing one crop all the time, plowing every year, is very extractive on the soil, right? So that's why they have to add so many chemicals to it to, get it to produce and yield as much as they'd like. So it's a very extractive on the soil health. It's not, building soil over time. It's
Mm-hmm.
extracting from it, right? And then there's another term called sustainable agriculture, which is better, right? It's kind of a break even, not adding, but not building soil health, but just sustaining. And then the next is regenerative, where you're actually building soil over time. And if you think about the areas where we grow corn and soybean and all these monocrop production, where's that at? It's mostly in the Midwest, Iowa, Kansas, all these areas where did that soil come from? Like some of it is, I mean, there's topsoil in the Midwest that can be over 3 foot deep, maybe 6 foot deep in some areas. And that really came from Mother Nature managing regeneratively. It's just how Mother Nature works. And that's how soil builds over time. That's why we're kind of, and so what's concerning is we're using these practices that are just extracting from it and depleting it. And so I think that's kind of a big fear of mine, that we're depleting soil over time, and we need to be using methods that can regenerate it. And that's what we practice here. And it really is just number one, trying to replicate these natural movements of animals and really paying attention as a farmer and rancher, paying attention to each paddock that you're in and the health of that paddock. And we use something called ecological outcome verification, which was developed by the Savory Institute. And it's really the science behind regenerative. And so we're actually every year measuring the biodiversity and measuring the health of that land, measuring how many critters live on that little area of paddock, each paddock that we graze in, and measuring that and quantifying that over time. And that really acts as a guide on what I do each year and how I manage my animals. So if some paddocks are not doing as well, we're going to manage a little differently. And it's really about how we impact it over time and cataloging that and measuring that.
That's amazing. And is it mostly about movement of the animals? When you say management, is it like how long they spend there? Or are there other techniques too that you're using?
Yes, it can be just how long they stay in one area. That's a component of it. There can be certain times where, you might have something going on one paddock and you want to do it a little differently. So, for example, there could be different ways you kind of stimulate a grassland to get it back to really healthy conditions. And it may mean at times you need lots of animal compacted really dense with a really high poundage per acreage. And there might be times you want it less and you want more recovery. And so it's really understanding this art of regenerative farming and ranching and understanding what that land needs and how do you really maximize its capabilities. So there is a bit of an art to it. There's also some really good science behind it as well. But the core thing is just how you manage those animals. And it could be, like I mentioned, maybe you want to graze it really heavy. Maybe you need to back off certain times of the year.
Yeah. And I read Fred Provenza's book, Nourished. And in there, he talked about having animals not eating like a mono diet or very limited diet, and having that ability to eat different plants and grasses based on their needs and their nutritional kind of requirements. And can you speak to that and why grazing is so important for that? A message from our sponsor. Farmer Jones Farm provides nutritious, regeneratively grown vegetables to home cooks nationwide. We seek to provide our community with vegetables grown in a way that's healthy for you and good for the planet. To learn more about Farmer Jones Farm, visit farmerjonesfarm.com.
Yeah. So on my ranch, you can pick any area and you might find 70 different species of grasses on that area. And each one of those grasses, they're, I believe, for a reason. They're filling some niche, some void, and working together to provide better soil health. And each one of them provides something different to that animal. So when you just graze one monocrop, an animal, he's not getting that diversity in nutrients. And I think that also transfers to our bodies as well. So I'm a big believer in diversity. In fact, a lot of the farmers and ranchers kind of laugh at me like, Eric, why do you have so many what they call weeds? And they're just but they're providing something for that soil. But not only that, these quote weeds are great pollinator species that our monarch butterfly or our bumblebees or our honeybees are using for nectar. And so we get really short-sighted when we think about what constitutes a healthy grassland. And it is not monocrops, it's diversity. And I'm a big believer in that, not only for the animal's health perspective, but also for our health perspective as well.
Oh, amen. I couldn't agree with you more. And I wanted to talk about the monarchs because it's incredible the amount of like habitat restoration and seeds that you guys have provided through the purchases from your company. Can you talk to like how you decided on that and then also the impact you've had?
Yeah, so we're kind of in Oklahoma. We're in this. So number one on the monarch butterfly, it's one of the most fascinating insects that I've seen in North America. In that this huge migration pattern that they take from Mexico all the way up to Canada and then back to Mexico in this one little forest where they overwinter. So and it's amazing. If your folks have a chance to read about it, they really should because it's such an incredible species of butterfly. But Oklahoma is one of their core areas where they nest, number one, on the initial migration up, but also a core area where they get nectar to fuel them for that energy all the way back to where their wintering grounds are in Mexico. And so it's an amazing story. And basically, they can only lay their eggs on a few species of milkweed. And that milkweed is critical for that butterfly, for that caterpillar to feed on. That's all they can feed on. And we've, again, the concept has been, plow it under or spray it to kill it, not thinking about the overall bigger picture of what it's affecting. And that milkweed has mostly been wiped out in its main corridor for the monarch. So that's why numbers are down 85% since 1970. And it's really on a path to basically be extinct if we don't act now. And so that was the impetus behind my passion behind it, because I see so much milkweed on my farm and ranch and I exist perfectly with it. It doesn't hurt it doesn't do anything. It just butterflies, and I love seeing that. And so we've started an initiative that every order that we ship out in the springtime is we send a packet of monarch seeds beneficial to your ecoregion. And our hope is that customers will plant that and basically learn about it and get the word out and think about what companies are helping improve monarch habitat. And you don't need to get too tied in on monarch alone. It's just our proxy for the bigger pollinator species of everything contributes. So the monarch is just the poster child for that. So we're thrilled that we can support that on our ranch and that we can inspire customers to maybe pick up that torch as well.
Yeah, my husband and I ordered meat from you guys recently and got the seeds. And, it was fun for our family to talk about where do we want to plant these and to talk about, we have small kids and they really enjoyed learning about the seeds and the plants. And, I think it's just really cool that you guys as a company are doing that. And it's really impactful too. And I saw the number on your website. I don't remember it, but it was like hundreds of thousands of
Yeah,
packets.
yeah, we no-till drilled in over 200,000 different pollinator species on our ranch. They
Wow.
take time to develop and come up, but we may not see a lot this year, but we will over the coming years.
That's
And I love
incredible.
it, so I'm the more diversity, the better for me. The great news is a lot of these species of plants, some of the that's in some of these that we planted are also beneficial for cattle. So
Hmm.
it's not just that it's for monarch, it really benefits the whole ecosystem. It's also beneficial for our honeybees that we raise here on the ranch. So there was I love diversity, but there also it benefits everything, and that's my whole concept is I want to raise food in a way that benefits all life, not just my animals, but all life. And when you do that, you have more life, you have
Yeah.
more grass, you have more cows, you have more deer, you have more pollinator. So this whole concept that nature really, when you start providing the right conditions, it provides an amazing bounty for all of us. I believe more than enough to feed the world this way. It's just us getting the right inputs and really speaking Mother Nature's love language, if you will.
Yeah, I love the connection that you have with that and how you see the whole picture, right? That it's not just about one species or one single thing. It's really a holistic view. And I wonder about too, if you could talk to or speak to the health benefits as far as like the omega-3 profile. I know when I did my fellowship, one of the things they talked a lot about was Australian studies looking at omega-3 versus omega-6 profile of animals that ate like were grass fed beef versus beef that ate like a limited diet of grains. Can you speak to that as well?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's not much debate here, but the health outcomes of the United States looks pretty bleak, to be quite honest. I mean, our longevity is declining. I think one of the worst countries in the world that longevity is declining, and I try to kind of trace back why that is, and you can pretty definitively see somewhere around the 80s things begin to change, and I don't think it's coincidence. Like, this is when the USDA's food pyramid came out and recommended a low fat, basically high carb diet, and kind of demonizing saturated fats and animal fats. And I think there's been a lot of negative health outcomes because of that logic, if you will. So and also on top of that, the conventional operations, these concentrated animal feeding operations that you mentioned that feed only grain the last part of the animal's life in beef in general. So the last 120 days are fed a straight grain diet that really alters that omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. So it skews it towards a much higher omega-6 ratio. And we know this because we've tested all our fats, and we can prove it with data. But it's also true for chicken and pork that now it doesn't mean chickens still don't get fed grain on the pasture scenario. They still get these starches supplement. Otherwise, it makes it extremely difficult. But they're on grass, they're on open roaming pasture, so they can still access bugs and forage. The same with pork, it's the same thing. When they're on pasture, just their feet on grass and not on a concrete floor, it changes that omega-6, omega-3 profile significantly. And so my big belief is just that, the reason fats probably got so vilified is because of these skewed ratios. But and now we've really skewed things towards even much higher omega-6, and just all the vegetable
Right.
oils and the corn oils and the soy oils, like those are extremely high, not would have never been normal in any human diet ever in human history. And this is a fairly recent change in our diet. I mean, in terms of human evolution, it's pretty quick, and I think there's been a lot of negative health outcomes because of that.
Absolutely. And I like how you focus on diversity. That's one of the things we talk about here, too. We grow over 600 different species of vegetables, microgreens, edible flowers, herbs. And, I think that diversity is really key to the ecosystem, but also to our diet. The phytochemicals that you get from eating different plants, and like your animals are getting from eating a wide variety of plants, that benefit is passed on to the consumer as well, then. And one of the other things I wanted to talk about, because I know this comes up a lot when we talk about environmental issues, is the environmental impacts of animals on land, which are grazed appropriately or optimally, versus animals in the more confined feeding operations. What's the difference in environmental impact, and kind of the argument for, I guess, the way you're managing?
Yeah, there's number one. There's several white papers and published papers out there that show regenerative grazing stores more carbon in our soils. Um, and so that's one thing. If we're sucking, carbon out of the air and putting it in the soil where we need it, that's a good thing. It's a good thing in terms of climate change. It's a good thing in water infiltration. And I think this is a concept where just growing monocrops, that's really difficult to do. And the positive health outcomes are also part of that as well. But we really need to think. I do believe food production, improperly raised food production, whether that's a monocrop or animals improperly grazed on land or put in concentrated animal feeding operations, are some of the biggest contributors to CO2 in the atmosphere. And we need to think of those things, those management styles that pull carbon out of the air and put it back in the soil. And so that's kind of a big driver of why I think we need to shift that food production. Um, but yeah, but as far as these concentrated animal feeding operations, they require a lot of monocrop ag to feed them, right? So if you put a beef on a straight corn diet for 120 days, that's a lot of land that's been wiped out for corn or soy or whatever monocrop. And if we're in that system growing grain, damaging land, emitting CO2 in the atmosphere by plowing every year, and then putting him in a concentrated animal feeding operation and then feeding that grain, that's not while it's efficient and the animals put on weight quickly, it is, I would argue, not the best for our environment. We'd rather put that corn field in a native tall grass prairie and graze beef on it. I think that would be
Yeah.
a better way to do it. And the other thing, the one thing I might comment on, beef get criticized for methane. I don't know if you've heard this. Like,
Yeah.
people limit cattle because they produce methane. They basically, through the processing of these grasses, they burp up methane, and that's a greenhouse gas that's 30 times more potent than CO2. And so people want to mitigate that methane. What people don't understand is there's a difference between cattle emitting methane in a concentrated animal feeding operation versus an animal emitting methane on a native prairie. And the reason that is there's something like called a methane cycle that happens on a native tallgrass prairie. And so when you're emitting methane on these prairies, there's methane oxidizing bacteria in that native prairie that feeds on that methane that beef releases. But if you have it on a dirt floor, and with thousands of head on a concentrated animal feeding operation, it's different. It is emitted to the atmosphere. So I think the benefits from limiting methane emission is another huge driver of why we should grow our beef cattle on pasture land instead of
Absolutely.
feeding operations.
So well said. And I couldn't agree more. And one of the things I found remarkable is soil is the second largest carbon sink, only second to the ocean, right? And so what we're doing with our soil really, really matters, to say the least. And so by rebuilding the soil, keeping carbon stored in the soil, I mean, that is really impactful for climate change or mitigating climate change. So, um, when we talk about your sauces. I love the various sauces you've come out with. I think they're great. They pair really well with the meats that you offer. Can you talk about how those came to be, and also why you chose to formulate them with such clean ingredients? I noticed they're really clean compared to a lot of the sauces on the market.
Yeah, we knew we were providing a superior product nutritionally to folks, and we talk a lot about the health benefits of grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And so and we wanted people to have, maximize their enjoyment on beef. And it would be a tragedy if they got their beef and they had to pour some, really terrible sauce on it and kind of ruin the health profile. So we thought we'd develop our own. And it's really, again, based on this concept of eliminating seed oils from our diet, that omega-6 ratio that we talked about, and then eliminating a lot of the processed sugars. So we only use honey or maple to sweeten these sauces, and use, as limited and clean ingredients as possible. So that was really the concept, is like, you're not going to get this healthy meat and then put junk sauce on it. So that was kind
Yeah.
of the impetus of why we went down that path.
That makes a ton of sense, and I so appreciate that. We ordered the Primal burgers, which I wanted to talk about too, because I love being able to incorporate the organ meats when you don't really necessarily taste them or notice them. It's a great way to have a hamburger. Can you speak to that and kind of the thought behind doing that? But also, are there any like more unique or unusual cuts that you wish people knew more about, or ones that you personally enjoy? A note from our sponsor.
The Chef's Garden is a family-owned regenerative farm that grows the most flavorful and nutritious vegetables, herbs, and microgreens to culinary professionals and home cooks. For over 30 years, the Chef's Garden has supplied some of the world's finest chefs and restaurants. Now, through Farmer Jones Farm, the same delicious ingredients are available to home cooks in the United States to use and enjoy, delivered directly to their homes. The Chef's Garden mission is to grow exceptional vegetables, care for each other and the land, and inspire a vegetable-forward future. For more information, visit chefs-garden.com.
Yeah, yeah. The Primal blend, the organ, people have figured out that organ meats were some of the most prized meats for humans, and especially for Native American tribes. And the reason is it's the most nutrient dense part of the animal. So it's like nature's vitamin. It really is. Now, what's been hard for people to stomach is the flavor has been off-putting for a lot of folks. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, how can we use our beef and improve that nutrient density even more? And one way is to add liver, and liver and heart, by the way, is in our Primal blend. And that's a great way to put it in your beef. Get that extra added nutrient density, but you don't really get the off-putting flavor. And in fact, I mean, I like it better. It's our best-selling product. So that was kind of the goal of that, is get more organ meats for people in their diet, but do it in a way that they enjoy it, and they crave it. And that product has really accomplished that, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I thought it was great. And you're right. You don't taste it, which I liked.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that's for sure. Most people, yeah, it's kind of I don't know, liver is, I like it, but it's kind of one of those things that you probably grew up on it and like it, or if you're just tasting it the first time, you may not like it.
Yeah, for sure.
And let's say, as far as products that I think people are missing out on, is there's a great recipe. We produce a Korean style short ribs, so we get lots of short ribs from beef cattle, and people just do not know what to do with it. But these Korean style short ribs paired with our no soy teriyaki sauce is the best thing in the world. I
Oh,
mean, I
yeah.
just wish more people would figure that out, because it's so amazing, and I could eat that every day.
What's the best way to cook the Korean short ribs? That's one thing. I've done them a few different ways before, and I've never had
Yeah.
yours. So,
So the thing about short ribs is they can be a challenge. Like, it's not something you can just throw in a pot and cook it for a few minutes. It's because it has a lot of sinewy tissue. It can be fairly tough. So basically, the best way that I found is if you have a pressure cooker, that's the best way for 30, 45 minutes, put it in the pressure cooker, cook it that way. It really gets it tender. Or you put it in a crock pot and you leave it for 8 hours. And it's amazing either way, but they really need either that pressure cook or that really long, low, slow temperature over time.
Oh yeah, I love that. And they're actually in our Father's Day box too.
Oh,
Which
yes.
yeah. Along with the chicken quarters. And I
Yeah,
think it's a
awesome.
really nice combination. One of the things I wanted to ask you too was about ways to cook meat to kind of maximize the health benefits. I know we talked about not putting the sauce on, like kind of junky sauces, but how about just like the cooking techniques in general? Do you have any go-tos that kind of help maintain those health benefits?
I I like everything in a cast iron skillet myself. I'm
Yeah.
partial to that, and I love steak. That's my
Mm-hmm.
favorite. And you can, if you use this method to cook any of our steaks, you will not have a bad experience. So part of the difficulty with grass-fed, grass-finished beef is if it's not cooked correctly, it can be a little bit tougher than people would like because we don't have all that, that marbling like a grain-fed steak would. So that's not what we do. We're about health and we're about health of the meat. But I've never had a bad experience with any of our steaks. And I take a cast iron skillet with just a little bit of butter in it, heat it up, and let your steaks thaw out, let them reach room temperature. And then you just sear them for 2 minutes on one side and flip it. Do 2 minutes again, and then do that two more times, 2 minutes, so a total of 8 minutes. Take it off, let it rest, about 3 to 4 minutes, and then cut into it. And it's amazing every time. It's just, a little pink in the center. And to me, that's how you maximize the best experience with grass-fed, grass-finished beef. Super simple. You cannot abuse it. You can't just throw it on the grill for, and really cook the heck, make it like, you can make it like shoe leather because it will dehydrate quickly, but using this method, it comes out perfect every time.
Oh, I love that. That's great advice. What's your favorite pairings as far as vegetables and your meats go?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I usually eat, so just to be totally transparent, I eat about probably 85% just meat.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, to be quite honest, I don't pair a lot of vegetables. When I do, it's probably green beans or broccoli. But
Okay.
I mostly almost all eat beef and some fruit. And
Oh,
that's the
awesome.
whole diet. That's been that way for a while. And so I have easy access to good clean beef. So I use that, but that's kind of been my go-to for about 3.5 years now.
Wow. And
Yeah.
did something like change your perspective to like guide you to eat that way?
You can't find good vegetables. And
Yeah.
I can grow them myself, but it was too much work for me. And I just like, I can't. So I went with what I have here. I do have fruit trees and stuff like that, and it's pretty easy. But yeah, it's hard to find good vegetables. So like your guys, and
Yeah.
great opportunity that is for people to source good, healthy vegetables. And that was really what I was struggling with. I didn't trust what was out there. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. We'll have to send you some.
I guess I would love that.
All right. So our podcast is called Farming for Health. What does farming for health mean to you?
So I think health can mean not just our health, but the health of the ecoregion we're working in, the health of the community that we're sourcing from. So there's a lot of things that tie up in farming for health because for example, farmers have the highest suicide rate in the nation. Well,
Mm.
why is that? There was a study that came out not too long ago that farmers doing regenerative farming and mething have a better well-being, have better profits. So farming for health has to include the farmer himself and that he's health mentally and physically. And that's why I'm so excited about this regenerative and farming and ranching catching on, that it will truly create better health for the planet, better health for the communities, and better health for the customer. And that's what gets me super stoked about it.
Oh, great answer. All right. So, any last thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with today?
I want to tell people that the consumer there's more power in the consumer's dollar than even voting. I truly believe that. And when consumers vote with their dollar, they're telling people, they're telling these bigger companies that, hey, this is the food we want to eat. And when we do that, things begin to shift very quickly. You can see that. I can name a number of things that's happened recently, how the consumer had power with their dollar. And hey, when you vote with your dollar, this is how you change the world quicker than any other method, in my opinion.
Oh, yes, I agree. All right. So where can our listeners find you online?
Yes, so it's very simple, just www.eatrep.com. You can see all the products we got. All these products are from regenerative certified farms and ranches locally. And Rep is really in the business of growing that regenerative farmer and rancher network. Really, we want to do this across the nation.
Wonderful. And a big thank you to our mutual friend, Tara Garrison, who helped introduce me to Rep. And
Yes.
she was the one who was like, you have to meet Eric. He's doing such a great job and such a wonderful person. So
Yes,
huge
she's
thank you to
awesome.
her.
Yes,
And
we love Tara. She's been our biggest fan for sure.
oh, good. Yes, we do too. So, and if you want to find our Father's Day box, it's on farmerjonesfarm.com under Father's Day, and it's limited edition. So, hopefully everyone will check that out as well, and you'll get vegetables and meat together, which is great. So, we're really thankful to have worked with you guys on that. And again, just so thankful to know you and for all the great work you're doing. Yeah, I'd love to see your ranch someday. It's incredible. So thank you for being on.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Farming for Health. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Connect with Farmer Lee Jones and I on Instagram and Facebook.